All right, perfect. All right, super excited to have you here at LatinThinks. We're excited to hear about your journey with the FarmLink project, Stanford, and all that. Would you like to start off with a personal introduction? Are you in college? Where are you located?
Yeah. I am in college. I'm a senior at Stanford, calling from local coffee shop. So please, don't mind the music in the background. And yeah, it's founded the FarmLink project just about two years ago. Amid the pandemic, and really I've just been working to grow that. Largely throughout North America.
Great. Yeah. So could you talk about how did the FarmLink project start? Where did you get the idea? Did you meet the team, or did you do it with friends? How did that whole process get started?
Yeah, we started the beginning of the pandemic, when in addition to the health crisis that was unfolding, there was also the economic one. So millions of families here in the US were forced to flood a charitable food system that's never really designed for a crisis. And at the same time, farmers were being forced to throw away millions and millions of pounds of food. And so that really big problem became really, really small for our local community who was facing the same problem. And so a couple of friends basically got together and started to figure out the X's and O's of how you could actually connect these two things.
That's great. And yeah, so you talk about how the problem was really how food was going to waste, and some people were also starving. So it's a really weird situation where the food's going to waste, people are starving. So it's great how you connect both of those to try to figure that out. And could you describe what the FarmLink project is, to the people who might not have heard of it before?
Yeah, totally. FarmLink project, we're connecting farms with surplus to food recovery organizations. So what does that mean? It's every year about a third of all the food that we grow in the world goes to waste. It's about 250 billion pounds a year that goes to waste at the farm level, where either this is going to be left on the field or it actually ends up in the landfill. And so what we do is basically create a system that can respond instantaneously when they have that surplus, to be able to pick it up and try to get it to its best possible destination, which the number one thing for us is getting it to people in need. So that's more or less what we do.
It's pretty amazing. And what are the logistics behind that? Because of course, this is produce that can go bad quickly, and you want to make sure that you're getting it at the right moment and then delivering it to the people who need it. So could you talk about the logistics? Do you guys have a warehouse where it comes out here and then you separate, or how does that whole process work?
Yeah, so I'd say it's changed a lot, and maybe that's something to think about on any of these projects, is what you start with doesn't need to be what you're actually going to do. The logistics initially were literally students driving U-Haul trucks from farms to food banks. Thank God for the safety of people, that students are no longer driving these large trucks full of tens of thousands of pounds of food. But now it's largely the software platform that's connecting the two. So if they have a surplus, you can notify us. That notifies basically our internal team that's able to quickly then broadcast that to a bunch of different places, figure out who needs that exact item at that exact time. And then it just schedules literally a semi truck to come pick it up. And so it's doing about 1.5 million meals a week, kind of through that system.
It's crazy. And are you guys only operational in the US right now, right? Or certain regions of the US, or the whole US?
We're I'd say primarily the US, but also operating in Canada and Mexico. It's actually right now Mexico, they have 50 million pounds of bananas right now. We're trying to figure out what to do with. There was a freeze, and it changed the color of the banana, the peel, by just a couple, enough to where the contract, they won't accept it. So now it's what do you do with 50 million pounds of perfectly good bananas? And so it's kind of challenges like that we're always trying to figure out.
Yeah, and it's also amazing because, for example, those bananas are perfectly fine, but since there's a slight detail that makes it considered trash to what was it, a wholesaler or a so it's pretty amazing how you guys tackle that issue directly and solve that. And so going on to the next question, what was probably the craziest or best experience you've had with the FarmLink project?
That's a great question. We built this whole team and this community of students all remotely in the pandemic, and about halfway through, it maybe moved 10 million pounds of food and was like really growing this organization. And we decided that we were going to rent an RV basically and start operating FarmLink out of this RV, because we wanted to be closer to the farmers that we were working with, the communities that we were serving, and instead of being remote, and kind of understanding the pandemic risks, and that it was worth doing that. And so for almost like 30 days, drove across the whole country, visiting like all sorts of farmers. It was like just really like made me appreciate the scope and scale of this problem, and realizing that like this wasn't a pandemic specific thing. Probably the craziest thing that came of that though was I actually won't, I'll share it another time. Offline with you, Jacob.
Yeah, but I imagine the beginning of the FarmLink project was completely different than where you guys are now. And you're talking about how you had to move with a single truck and you guys were really having to go. And the team now, is it a pretty big team right now at the FarmLink project?
Yeah, so I think we're about 17 full-time staff, full-time team, and then about 100 part-time students as well.
That's amazing. So. Yeah, and a little bit more about yourself. I saw that you went to Stanford. Did the project come? Are you still in Stanford right now, or did you just graduate?
Yeah, no. So I'm still here. I think graduated in just 2 weeks. And the majority of our team is also kind of friends from here.
That's great. That's great. And so when you were actually designing this idea on paper, of course, and we started with the business model of it and how it's going to work, and now we're actually implementing it, was there any issues, like unexpected issues that you saw that you could have only done or saw through like experience or through actually doing it?
Yeah, maybe that's like I would say the whole thesis, or what that I've taken from this is like the chance that you are going to like sit in a room and think through and get every detail right. And then it's like, oh, then it's just going about and executing that. It's like, that's not how it works. And like, whatever you come up with, like, is not going to be right. But the most important thing is getting started. And I think that's like where 99% of ideas stop, is you think something up that's too difficult to get started. And then it never kind of happens. And figuring out, if you have this big vision for this like thing you want to do, how can you make that really, really small in order to get started quickly, to start learning, to figure out what the right actual thing to build is. So for FarmLink, that was like, we're not going to build a system that can connect millions of pounds of fresh produce to thousands of communities. It was, let's connect one farm to one food bank. And it's like, how are you even going to do that? It's like, let's not even try to figure that out. Let's just go rent a truck ourselves and drive it. So definitely that philosophy has been pretty ingrained into me from this.
Yeah, that's been pretty amazing. And the other day on Wednesday, we had also a group of guest speakers here in Paraguay, locally based, who work on a startup called Le Mango, and they collect the mangoes here because on the floor from trees and all that. And I've been turning that into juices, and they just won the whole prize. So it's great to see how there's also some similarity between both of you guys, how you both tackle this huge issue, but it's also amazing to see the different ways you do it. They're tackling it by collecting the mangoes that have fallen on the ground already, but you guys are going straight to the farm. So it's really, really interesting to see. And what is your vision with the FarmLink project in the next 5 years? What is your goal? Because you're talking about the concept and where your vision was before. So where do you guys want to be in the next 5 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. The way I maybe framed this earlier, but like this, we're not even scratching the surface of the scale of this problem, or you could say the opportunity. Like the reality is the way that we grow food in an external like environment is going to result in surplus, and that's actually not a bad thing. That's a good thing. The question is then, what do we do with this? Because it obviously has like a lot of environmental challenges for doing that. So yeah, we're trying to like really scale what we're doing by making the actual delivery like cost effective. And so the way we're doing that is actually through like quantifying the carbon emissions that you're saving by preventing this food from going to landfill, and then actually selling carbon credits. So that's probably our long-term play to actually scale this from what is now like tens of millions of pounds, about, I guess about 100 million pounds a year to, hopefully billions and billions of pounds of fresh nutritious produce.
Yeah, and what's also really interesting is how you mentioned issue really isn't with how much food we actually need to grow, but rather the logistics and transportation of that. So it's super interesting because that's normally the common conception. And yeah, so going back to that, what advice would you give to all the students here watching or listening? Because they're going to start, like I talked with you before, they're also coming up with their own innovative ideas that tackle issues like this. So what would be your main advice or recommendations for them starting something like that too?
Yeah, get started. Like have like dream really, really big, start really, really small, and move really, really quickly. Like I don't think what FarmLink did, like I think everyone saw those same problems and was like, oh, we definitely should do something about this. And the difference is we just actually got started. It's like, oh, where do you even start with that? It's like, make it as small as possible while having a really big vision for what you want to accomplish. And so I think like on these projects, and after you come up with that large vision for this workshop, is like, hey, maybe let's actually do this. Let's figure out tomorrow, Saturday, how do we take that big vision and translate it into like the first step that we can take? And you're going to learn so much along that way that you will figure out what the right thing is ultimately. So that would be my largest advice there.
Yeah, definitely. And could you also share some of the statistics or like what you guys reached? Because I saw it was a ton of pounds of trash reduced and all this. Could you maybe explain a little bit of like the exact numbers and all that?
Yeah. So we've delivered 75 million pounds of fresh fruits and vegetables to a couple thousand different like community-based organizations. So reaching roughly like a million people, largely in the United States, but also Canada and Mexico now. That's prevented 100 million pounds of CO2 emissions, which is from preventing food from going to waste where it rots in the landfill, produces methane, which is way worse than CO2. We've raised $12 million to continue to scale kind of this solution. And so that's why it's like, well, we are proud of what we've accomplished so far. It's really scratching the surface of what we think we're going to do over the next couple of years. I'm trying to think other stats. A big thing is like the students, I would say. Like our team, and maybe this is different, it's like it's entirely had been run by students for like a year and a half, built this to probably 30 million pounds with not a single like full-time person. Literally just students who like kids from high school, kids from college, and got this going. And I think, yeah, that's a stat that it's not even a stat, but I think that's maybe the thing that sometimes gets lost now with where we are with FarmLink is that's actually how it started. It wasn't that people had like a genius idea or anything. It was like a bunch of students working really hard and moving really quickly.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And definitely the students also bring a lot to the team. And it's great to see that you also built an amazing team because normally behind a great product has to become a great team because they're the ones who have to adapt always to all these issues. And I also found it super interesting how you mentioned that it wasn't just an issue with food waste, but then there's also some other issues involved, like more carbon dioxide being produced because more trash has to be processed. And so it's super interesting to see that. And how was the first fundraising experience for you? Because normally it's the hardest. The first one they say is the hardest, especially with a new idea. How was that for you? What were the challenges and what was advice you would give to people in the similar position?
Yeah, I mean, so ours was very unique because it was like amid the pandemic in the crisis. Like everyone was feeling this where you would go to the grocery store and the shelves are empty. And yet then you're reading about farmers throwing away all this food and you just can't really make sense of it. So it was something that was so topical and top of mind, and we had a solution that could address this really quickly. And so it was more or less the urgency of what we were doing that I think allowed us to get over that initial hump. And then we had a ton of news coverage that definitely like really catapulted, I would say, like us when we were getting covered like relative to what we'd done, which was almost like nothing, but the story of students renting trucks, driving the farm to food bank, like caught media's attention, which really then made the fundraising process not too hard. So I think, I'm not sure that's actually that helpful of a, a thing for fundraisers. I'm not sure like how you can really replicate that. But that was how it worked out for us.
Yeah, and I assume the fundraising experience was, of course, much more different as it is a nonprofit. And is that that's a different experience than raising for a for-profit company, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Weirdly, it starts to converge. I guess it depends on where you're raising for like a nonprofit. I think people think about nonprofits like totally backward, and it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy of like, challenges that nonprofits face. And I don't think it actually has to be that way. So like largely we've been, I guess initially was raising more traditional like philanthropy dollars, but now it's much more like social ventures who are investing, where it's like, we expect this and we expect this return, but the return is in like impact and these metrics. And if you guys hit these numbers, like you'll get another round of funding. And you don't hit the numbers, then that's it. So it does kind of start to converge, more or less. But it depends. It's like, it's really like where you're pulling from. Like that's so different than raising from like individuals.
Yeah, that's really great. And funnily enough, here at LatinThinks, we also are offering the opportunity for students to raise money. We partnered with a fund in the US called 1517, and some of the best submissions who show excellence and passion and stuff like that will have the chance to pitch in front of a board of investors. So it's great that we're going to provide the opportunity and provide your insights. So it works both together.
That's awesome. So one team will have the opportunity to pitch. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the people who show excellency, passion, and have a great teamwork too and product all around, we're going to select around 3 or 4 people, and they will have a chance to invest in front of a group of investors or get feedback from them on their product and all that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and now, of course, there's more new technologies coming around, like drones, for example. That is something that has been coming up more often. Are you thinking of incorporating this into the FarmLink project in some way to maybe excel how fast we can get to one place to the other?
Interesting. So I think we're probably pretty far out from, because the quantity that we're talking about is like semi-truck loads. Like the average time that we're picking up a farm, it's like 40,000 pounds of potatoes. So probably not drones there, but I think there's a huge opportunity on like the last mile stuff. So say we pick up like giant semi trucks from different things. We bring from 10 different farms, you bring them to a central location, you create these mixed packages. And then it's like, how do you actually reach that last mile piece? I think there's an opportunity there, but it's probably not something we're going to be like spearheading, but rather like if that's the way the market goes and all of a sudden that's how last mile is being done, right? Adapt with it.
Yeah, that's great. And do you happen to know how long does it take from exactly when you collect it from the farm and to get right into the person's hand? Do you know how long this takes?
Yeah, so obviously it depends on like any given delivery. I think the average is like 40 hours. And a lot has to happen in that 40 hours, from like someone notifying you to actually picking it up, delivering it to the central warehouse, creating these mixed packages, getting those mixed packages out to basically distribution, like groups that then get these to like churches, mosques, temples, like after school programs, at soccer practice. Like our like big philosophy is you want to make this as like accessible as possible in a way that you wouldn't think about it as like charitable food assistance or anything. You just think this is just like food is present. It's just like you go to a park and you have a water fountain and you're able to have water. It's like we're going for that same idea. And so I think what I love about kind of this piece is you don't even really realize, you don't even realize that it's like this is surplus food or anything. It's just food that's present at your after school program, at things like that. And I think that's a better way to do it than kind of the traditional like charitable food model.
Yeah, definitely. And that's actually a really great turnaround time, under a little bit under 2 days, and you can already get it to someone's hands. So that's pretty amazing. And has there been any complications? What, first of all, do you offer this food for free, I assume, right? Or is there
Yes,
some
yeah.
price on it?
No, yeah,
And
it's totally for free.
right. And has there been any issues with that? Because of course, if it is free, you have to rely, you still have to pay for transportation costs and all that logistics. So do you normally use that money from investors, or how's that whole process?
Yes, so that's the carbon piece. So take like this banana example. Um, if if take like a truckload of bananas, if they've determined that the bananas are like 1 degree too brown, you and I couldn't see it, but the contract specifies it. They're now going to send those bananas to landfill, where it rots, produces methane 25 times worse than CO2. And we can actually quantify the exact carbon emissions, like CO2 equivalents, that comes from that. And then we can quantify the exact emissions that come from, instead, us transporting it, getting to people, what percent actually ends up getting wasted, all those things, to figure out what's that like emissions difference. And then we actually have a third party come and literally verify this to get the exact emissions reduction and sell that as a carbon credit. So we're funding this by like through the environmental benefit, and then companies that say they have an airline, they don't have, there's not like abundant, they don't have a way to fly a plane that doesn't produce CO2. So they're going to buy these carbon offsets. And that's largely how we fund this.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it all up, and it's great to hear your whole experience and journey with the FarmLink project. So thank you so much for coming out. If there's any questions anyone has online, now is the time. Let's see. Any questions though? Yeah.
It's kind of about how they spread that food to people. I heard that they get it in their packages and they go to people. But with the example of bananas, like how they get that.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard that. So one of my classmates was asking, how do you deliver it? Do you deliver it in packages? And for example, the bananas, 50 billion bananas, 50 million, sorry. Do those get spread out and then delivered in packages across the community? Or what is the distribution?
Yeah. So we've been really intentional about not focusing on the last mile, but rather partnering with groups who really know their community and understand the context in which this actually makes sense. So we really partner. So it depends on the context. So like if it's a partner that does this, say like their primary thing is schools, or like after school programs, it's not going to be packaged. It's going to be literally like put out like on the table when you go and do your homework, kind of thing. So as opposed to like other contexts where people may be cooking this up into meals and then actually delivering this to people in packages, it really depends on the partner that we're working with. Our job is really how do we get a lot of it's a lot simpler of a job, honestly, but get like say that truckload of bananas to our mixing facility where there's going to be like a bunch of other items that can be packaged together essentially in boxes, just like when you order produce, it comes just like this on a pallet, and then they use that to get to the like individual agencies.
All right, so it's more of like a bulk order delivery, and then that gets distributed in the community.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, that's great to hear. So yeah, thank you again for coming out. It's amazing to hear about the FarmLink, and I think they'll wrap it all up. We'll stop it right here.
So thanks so much.